people that are destroying our country.
All people are concerned about the problems we see in the world, whether it be hunger, whether it be denial of human rights. No one wants to see war. Everyone would rather the world live in peace. To me, it's not just wanting and caring about that, it's how, I ask the question, how am I personally involved in that, and how can I personally respond to that, and change what I don't like, make better what I would like to see different. And the refusal to pay taxes is my statement and my saying that I personally do not want to be involved in the taking of human life. 63% of my income tax goes for military purposes, goes for purposes that of finding more effective and more massive ways to kill people. And that just violates who I am. Since 1979, I have not paid that portion of my federal taxes that go to the military.
People are told to make unending sacrifices to the two-headed goddess back in Fort Fumble there, the goddess of war and prosperity. You know, they go together in many people's minds. It grows out of World War II. We have a memory of the World War II ending the Great Depression of the 30s, and people think that that's not only a good way to stay safe, but it makes you rich. There's no countervailing forces to check the greed of the powerful, dominant institutions that operate and control this process. This is a toolbox which was purchased at retail by Congressman Berkeley Bedell, full of tools, for $100.38 total, box, tools, and all. He did that because the Navy, for the same box of the same tools, had paid $10,168.56. And he wanted to demonstrate that Pentagon need not pay those outrageous prices. We had a series of outrageous disclosures like this back in 83 and 84, and the Pentagon was furious about it. They blamed me and my associates for many of the outrages becoming public, and began to rail at us. This cartoon appeared in the Washington Post, and you might ask yourself, what are all these people so angry at this person who looks like you're a bureaucrat for? Why are they so riled up? Well, fact is they've got a secret, and they don't want you to know it. They don't want the taxpayers to know it. And the secret is that this overpriced stuff is not an exception. It's the rule in our buying system.
The guys who are in defense contracting companies were hired for one reason only, to maximize profit. The Reagan administration increased the fighter aircraft budget by 75% over what the Carter administration was going to spend. And we ended up procuring 11% fewer airplanes, even though there's a 75% increase in the budget. Now, why is that so? Because the unit cost of each airplane just grew out of sight, and defense companies are no fools. They realize that that money can be soaked up by having each plane get more and more expensive, and they can get more money by building less planes. The bottom line is, though, it has nothing to do with defense, defending the country.
Since Mr. Reagan, there has been a relocation of the inflation process. We formerly understood inflation as the increase in the price of consumer goods. Mr. Reagan has added a new dimension. Here's how it worked. The military budget was run up, and that made a giant deficit in the federal government budget. To make up the deficit, the federal government borrowed. As the government borrowed, persons abroad were attracted by the opportunity of lending dollars to Uncle Sam, the rate of interest, the assured return. It looked like a safe investment. However, the Treasury doesn't want to borrow, say, cruzeros if you're in Brazil. They want dollars. So if you're in Brazil, you must go to your bank and change cruzeros to dollars. When a lot of cruzeros are offered for dollars, the price of the cruzeiro goes down and the price of the dollar goes up. And as that took place in about 15 countries, the average price of the dollar rose 75% from 1980 to 1985, with the result that American firms suddenly found that it's impossible for them to compete with this escalation in the price of the dollar.
The result was an epidemic of factory closings.
All wants a job for Christmas. A job!
Youngstown was once compared to the Ruhr in Germany as being a steel-producing area, second largest in the United States, if I'm correct. And when the shutdown came, there were 55,000 people that were working in steel and related to steel that lost their jobs. When we saw that the company was not investing at any substantial amount to keep pace with modern steelmaking, there were some of us in the plant that had fears that the end was in sight. There was no mercy when they started shutting things down, and throw it away. Throw people away, throw resources away, throw children away. What are we talking about with a wartime economy? You know, I was in the Second World War and the Korean War, and it's ridiculous. I mean, those military. You know, who are we defending ourselves from? If there weren't any Russians, my goodness, we'd have to invent somebody. Anybody that wants land reform is a communist, is a Russian. Anybody that wants something better for their kids than they had is, you know, was the last revolution, the one we had, was that the last good revolution? You know, what are we talking about here? We talk about self-determination, but we don't let other people in our sphere of influence have self-determination. When we support the Duvaliers and the Marcoses and the Shah of Iran and Chiang Kai-shek back in the 40s and 50s. The defense thing is just so bloated. If they had not built one nuclear submarine, they could have reopened the Youngstown works and modernized it. Now, what does one nuclear submarine mean in the whole scheme of things when you can kill everybody 20, 30 times over in the world? I don't know if people look at it that way, but we did here. That was one of our issues. You can already kill everybody 20 to 30 times. Why make that one more submarine?
Those of us who grew up in mill towns, as I did, recognize the characteristics readily. Washington is a one-industry town, but the industry is not making steel or textiles or some useful product like that. The industry here is politics. And the lifeblood of politics is patronage. Handing out of favors and to your friends and withholding them from people you don't like. And it just happens that the handiest form of patronage is government contracts. And the easiest kind of government contract to sell to the Congress and the taxpayers is military contracts.
You might be interested to know that the scriptures are on our side in this.
They want to keep you on the edge of always feeling that readiness is going down, because that's the best way to get budgets passed.
Our security and our hopes for success at the arms reduction talks hinge on the determination that we show here.
It's really the way the system's set up, is the more money you push into it, the more your readiness is going to degrade, because the system is corrupt and it absorbs whatever amount of money is put into it. You know, defense companies realize that the Pentagon doesn't have a profit and loss sheet, so Pentagon can waste as much money as they want, and it's not going to hurt business.
The most recent historical parallel to what has happened in our country is the experience of Germany in the 1930s. There was a politician there who had a brilliant scheme for ending unemployment in Germany, put everybody to work, making guns, tanks, submarines, airplanes, whatever, to rearm Germany, to make them feel proud and strong. The system was called Wehrwirtschaft, which I think roughly translates as defense economic system. Now, the purveyor of this scheme was the politician named Adolf Hitler. And it worked for a time. It seemed like it was the answer to an economist's prayer. The Germans were put to work. They felt good about themselves. Everyone who wanted a job, every man, was employed. You had to have scapegoats, and eventually, of course, you have to have a war. The problem being that this vast machine that Adolf set up didn't manufacture or make things that foreigners wanted to buy. So he didn't earn enough in foreign trade to buy the things that Germany needed to exist and prosper. And so he, in the end, had to go to war to steal what he could no longer earn enough to buy. And we're having the same thing happen to us in this country. We had our first trade deficit in history for an entire year in 1971. That's hard to believe. Just a few short years ago for us old folks. And now, when the deficit is no more than $15 billion a month, we think we're doing pretty well. Actually, we're doing disastrously.
Imagine the slogan, the strong dollar. What a remarkable fraud. But that has meant that in the course of satisfying the requirements of the military economy, operating by the myth of the U.S. being indefinitely rich, then civilian industries across the board have been made increasingly less able to serve even the American market. And that goes a long way to explain what is otherwise a mystery, namely the reason why so many American farmers are suddenly unable to produce at a competitive price in the U.S.
Well, we're just supposed to raise food real cheap, and one of the implications of that are that we're going to be driving not only farmers in the United States out of business, but people in the European countries and in the Central American, South American countries, that the third world nations are trying to raise crops for exports because they need those dollars to pay their debt, and we're driving them to have to compete with our grain that's flooding the market. It's just very difficult. There's a real imbalance, and that what we are paying out in somewhere in the area of $4 billion worth of taxes, we're getting maybe $1 billion back into our state, and that includes the agricultural subsidies and I hate that word, agricultural subsidies. They're not subsidies, they're loans. $1 billion that comes in federal money for agriculture is not money that is a giveaway.
Federal Land Bank of Omaha bids $151,000.
Despite cries of protest from the crowd, in less than 2 minutes, the only way of life Norma Fetter had ever known was gone.
If there's no other bids, the sale's closed.
Right out of here. Illegal sale.
Let the corporation sign the papers.
The problems down on the farm have cost Fetter more than just a piece of land. A year ago, her husband, Philip, put a gun to his head and pulled the trigger.
The system convinced him that he was a failure. We know he wasn't, but the system convinced him that he was, to the point where he thought that the way out was to take his own life. That, again, is another example in my mind of how this is not just an economic problem across the country. It's a social and moral problem that's affecting every one of us.
We get fed all this information that it's programs like farming that are just draining the federal budget, and when you look at it, it's just about the opposite. The federal budget is draining the agricultural income from Iowa and not putting money back into Iowa, and there's basically around the United States that's not, Iowa isn't too much different than other states like Wisconsin and Minnesota and that are basically agricultural states that are also, these are happening too. With $4 billion going out and maybe $1 billion, around $1 billion coming back in, it is a stark revelation on the fact that Iowa is subsidizing the federal government and basically the military.
Remember, there are no limits to growth and human progress when men and women are free to follow their dreams.
A second chapter in the government's borrowing to finance its enlarged military budgets is now unfolding. By the borrowing that included large borrowing from abroad, the price of the dollar was pushed up. That lasted 5 years. Now the price of the dollar has collapsed, and therefore automatically the prices of imports will rise. But there can be no corresponding growth in US-based production, because by 1985 many factories had been dismantled and their workers dispersed. Now, with higher prices of imports, the purchasing power and the average level of living of Americans will fall.
Our president has said, I will not raise your taxes, will not have a tax increase. By the same token, they have cut out programs and said to units of county government, state government, if you want to continue these programs, you pay for it. Okay, a tax is a tax, whether it be federal, whether it be state, whether it be local. The only thing that has happened, in my judgment, is the burden has been passed all the way down to the local units of government. If we are going to continue the programs that the people have gotten used to, needed services, somebody has to pay, and unfortunately it falls upon the county judge and the fiscal court to make the tough decision. We're either going to cut the program or we're going to find a way to fund it.
If you go the 41 cents on the $100, that's about 12 cents raise on your taxes. And I personally own a lot of property myself, and I don't mind paying it because we've got to have taxes to run this county, and I don't think any of the taxes has been illegally spent or otherwise.
The average person
was all published in
cannot get to their congressman. They cannot get to their senator. They're a little isolated. They're in Washington. They can get to the county judge because we're there every day. Their magistrate lives in their neighborhood. Their county commissioner lives in their neighborhood. So I think we get the pulse for the people first.
People who wish to speak to the board concerning the budget.
There's places in town that are going out of business every day. We own a family business, and it's struggling just to stay above water. And with 65% tax increase, we'll probably go out of business, I'd say within 6 months to a year's time.
And I think it's ridiculous that this board that sits up here in front of us has got us in a mess like this. And I am opposed to any kind of a tax increase. I don't care what kind it is.
Over half of the land in Wise County is owned by corporations outside of Wise County. I think that perhaps these people should maybe pay a little more tax instead of the private individual.
Jim Brown's got property joining my dad's property. His property assessed, the biggest part of it around there, at a value of $1 an acre. My dad got 8 acres appraised at over $10,000 an acre. Now, where is that fair? If one man can pay it, why can't we all?
And we can't hardly pay the taxes now. And if they increase the taxes, what are we going to do? Where are we going to go? We just can't afford it. We work till daylight to dark and try to save, and we can't even do that. So I don't know what we're going to do.
Every time they need something at the school, they want to raise some money through a levy. Well, everybody who's on fixed income, or a great many people who are on fixed income, strike out at that levy and vote no, because they can't take it out on the federal government. You don't get to vote on your income taxes or how they're adjusted. So you strike out at the police levy, the school levy, street levy, library levy. So what are we doing to our own kids? You know, it takes money to operate a school, a community. But if the only way you can strike out is vote no, it's self-defeating.
This is a nationwide problem. It's not isolated to Kentucky or Tennessee or Indiana or Illinois. It's a nationwide problem. The infrastructure of our entire country is in trouble.
Here in this neighborhood, what we have is a vast decay of abandoned buildings, most of which are city-owned. The city owns over 300 vacant tenement buildings, many of which have been abandoned by their landlords or have been taken over by the city because the landlords have not paid their taxes. The city claims it has no money or very little money to rehabilitate. They do patchwork type of work, but they are not aggressively tackling the problem of the lack of housing. They are claiming that because of the lack of federal funds cut off during the Reagan administration, that they do not have the kinds of monies needed to rehabilitate these homes. The Committee to Save East Harlem refuses to accept the fact that there is no money to rehabilitate these homes. We've always operated under the premise that both the federal and the city government have the monies available if they were willing to do it. The city gives tax abatements to rich developers like Donald Trump through J51 and 421A. These are tax abatements for luxury condominiums, yet they say they cannot subsidize. The federal government says it wants to get out of subsidizing housing, but it subsidizes dictators and subsidizes counter-revolutionaries in Central America. So we do not accept the fact that there is no money. What we're saying is that the money is displaced to other areas.
I have my veto pen drawn and ready for any tax increase that Congress might even think of sending up. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
Any theory that suggests that Reagan administration policy is designed to shift money towards the rich is probably right. That's what they've been all about through their entire term in office, whether it's their tax bills or their budget bills or their regulatory bills. I think you could fairly say that the goal of this administration, the overriding goal, has been to shift wealth towards upper-income people. Now, the government borrowing a lot of money tends to do that.
When the federal government has a deficit of $200 billion, as it did last year, it borrows the $200 billion. How does it do that? It issues paper. That paper is known as Treasury bills, Treasury notes, and Treasury bonds. Who can buy that Treasury note or Treasury bill? They come in denominations of $10,000. So it's obviously the rich and financial institutions who buy the debt. The income taxes are used to pay the interest. So in effect, it is no exaggeration to say that the deficit and the federal debt that's created by the deficit is one more means of transferring wealth from the working people to the rich.
The military enterprise now is, to put it plainly, a confidence game. We are told to have confidence in the idea that it protects us. It doesn't. In fact, it can't. Before World War II, the Navy could shield the shores of the United States. Nobody can shield the United States today from modern intercontinental weapons. It's physically impossible. And Mr. Reagan's idea of a Star Wars is simply a fantasy. It cannot be done. It never will be done. Therefore, we have to ask, what are all the new nuclear weapons for? What function do they serve? They serve an economic function. They supply orders, and they give decision power, and they give money flow to the firms doing the work and to the people who are in charge. And these are the private managers, and these are also the state managers. In that realm, there is definite success.
The Internal Revenue Service will pay a finder's fee of 3% to any licensed realtor or real estate agent who registers a successful bidder for this sale.
Pursuant to the authority contained in Section 6331
I think
and
we have
6335,
the right to be civilly disobedient. And I mean, I do so with the knowledge of what the consequences are or what they may be.
I hereby offer all right, title, and interest of Jerome Hart in and to the property seized for non-payment of certain internal revenue taxes.
the primary issue for me is whether or not I can be forced to participate or will allow myself to participate in a system that is inconsistent with what I believe. And by not paying my taxes, I'm saying no, I will not participate in that.
The government's minimum bid is $4,616.19. Unless I hear a higher bid, immediately the property will be bought by the United States government for $4,616.19.
$855.
I have a bid for $4,855.
The auction and the fact
third
that
and final time, we have a
the land
bid
was
for
able to be purchased by a land trust will serve as a catalyst for much more happening. The principles behind the land trust and a lot of land issues are very much tied in with peace issues. The control of land has also meant the control of people. And particularly you look at other countries around the world where there are civil unrest, particularly in Central America, so much of that is based on land issues and the control of land. Control of that land has meant the economic and political control of those people who live on that land or who are dependent upon that land.
Now, this conjunction of an immense military establishment and a large arms industry is new in the American experience. Our toil, resources, and livelihood are all involved. So is the very structure of our society. In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes.